This is Discourse Lab. I'm Anthony Rispo.
And I am Clayton Smith.
On this podcast, you'll hear a wide range of perspectives from an ideologically diverse suite of guests.
Our goal? To use conversation to analyze ideas, test arguments, and question dogmas. Now, let's head into the lab. All right, well, we're recording. Hello, everyone. We are here with our first ever guest on the podcast, so we're very excited about that. Jonas Du. Jonas Du is currently a fellow at the Free Press, a recent graduate of Columbia, much like ourselves, who you founded Sundial, Columbia's newest, coolest publication, student magazine. What else am I missing, Jonas? Am I missing anything?
Those are the highlights for sure. Yeah. We all graduated together. We all, to an extent, worked on the Columbia Sundial publication. We're all very much in the heterodox / healthy discourse space, and we've been almost radicalized by our experiences at the university. So, this is happy to be here, happy to get started.
All right. Well, we're happy to have you. I guess we should start off with kind of the origin story, your origin story. So and how far back do we want to go? You're from Georgia. You went to Columbia, obviously. And then while you were there, correct me if I'm wrong, you worked for the Columbia Spectator, which is Columbia's sort of most well-known, most built out, most historic student publication. And then you left and eventually founded Sundial. So what was that trajectory like, in your own words?
Yeah, so I think maybe we can even go back even further. This is something I don't think I've talked about on a podcast yet. But in high school, the main thing I did was not actually journalism. It was filmmaking. I was a filmmaker. I made short films and documentaries, and that was a lot of fun. And I learned basically how to tell a story from that. But the thing I did on the side was that I was on my high school's student paper. Now, this was a private school, so we didn't have First Amendment rights, and we were, basically the school could tell us, you can't publish this, you can publish this. But I was on the opinion staff. I was opinion editor 1 year. And the year I was opinion editor, I believe it was my senior year. So this would have been fall of 2020 to spring of 2021. And everyone knows the craziness that happened in the summer of 2020. It was COVID, it was George Floyd, and being in Atlanta, we had massive protest. I remember there was a curfew in place as well. And so that was very surreal to live through, and definitely a political awakening sort of era for me. And, to put it simply, our high school tried to become extremely woke by the fall, by the time we had returned to school by the fall. And you can imagine the things this entailed, right? Changing the English curriculum, taking out classics and putting in things like Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? We had to read Between the World and Me, which, if that's a whole thing we can get into.
Actually, I don't want to derail us too much, but I am curious. I haven't yet read it. I've been meaning to for a very long time, but people always lose their minds about how good of a writer Ta-Nehisi Coates is, and they'll say something. I'll hear people say something like, even if you don't agree with him, like, he's a phenomenal writer. So
yeah, I've heard that too. I've heard that from Glenn Lowry. Yeah,
right.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Do you think so?
Absolutely. He knows how to use words, and he knows how to convey emotion. It is just that the actual substance of what he is writing is absolutely insane and absolutely detrimental to the spirit of the country. And this is in contrast to we had to read in our freshman year literature core curriculum class at Columbia. At the end of the semester, at the end of the year, we read Ocean Vuong, who I think is lauded as a very good modern writer, modern poet. But in reality, a lot of things he writes, they just sound good, they're aesthetically good, but they're not actually good substantively in the same way that Coates' writing is good and makes sense. So you know, that's something that I can definitely appreciate. But you know, he's talking in this book like, oh, on 9/11, I could have no sympathy for like the firefighters who went there to save people, or the policemen who were in action, because this whole system was built to destroy people like me. And it's just like crazy. It's just like that,
Right.
page after page. That's probably one of the more crazy examples, but it's, you can understand that's the kind of thing that the school was promoting and thought that was anti-racist. And so one of the initiatives that they also had us do was, in our homerooms, essentially, they handed out in the fall these anti-discrimination pledges. We have, you know, an honor pledge. We have, you know, other things that we agree to as a community that we've always had at this school that's been around for many decades. But this was new, an anti-discrimination pledge, and they wanted all of us to sign it. And essentially, the pledge went something like, "On my honor, I will pledge to be anti-racist and undertake anti-racist education." And it was all of these buzzwords that had sort of emerged that summer as part of the discourse around systemic racism. And so they wanted us to sign this. They're like, oh, this is like obviously like the morally correct thing to do, right? And then I'm like, hold on, like I had just been listening to all of these like center right podcasts through the summer. I was like, wait, this doesn't like make a lot of sense to me. This is like still an ongoing issue, and there's a lot of problems with the way a lot of these words are with anti-racism education and things like that, right? This is the time when Robin DiAngelo's white fragility
Right.
was going viral. And where she's like, oh, you can't like cry in front of a black person, or you can't do all of these things, and just these ridiculous like double standards and things that are just like, you know, reverse racism essentially, and much more. And so I'm like, okay, if that's what you mean by anti-racist education, I'm not sure I agree with that. So, you know, I didn't sign the pledge. I ended up writing an opinion piece saying, hey, like, let's go through all of these terms that you're using. Let's talk about what you actually mean by discrimination. Do you mean like disparate outcomes, or do you mean like actual discrimination, right? Because that's not defined. And most importantly, what do you mean by anti-racism, right? Do you mean like treating everyone the same? Because that's something I agree with. Or do you mean this kind of, you know, radical critical theory based approach that, you know, we've seen since that year take over the left and take over the racial discourse? So I wrote this op-ed. You know, it went through editing. It was, you know, a little bit controversial. And then it got shut down by the advisor to the newspaper. He was like, we can't publish this. And he was like, come into my office, I'll tell you why. And then so when I came to his office, he was a history teacher. I went to his office. He had printed out my draft and marked up a bunch of things. But it wasn't like, when you're editing opinion, as you certainly know, Clay, but even as you know, Anthony, as a writer, the editor is meant to provide you feedback that strengthens your argument and that like makes it easier to defend. And it's not meant to like argue. They're not meant to argue with you, right? They're not.
Well,
They're
it's
meant
not
to
meant
push
to
back where
correct
it's like
this.
from the It's not like,
It's not meant to
like your
correct
opinion's
the
wrong.
substance.
The substance of it,
right.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To improve
So
the
what-
quality of the writing, not the substance
Yeah.
of the argument. Yeah.
And so what this guy did was he you know, he marked it up and was essentially disagreeing with my argument. Was like, oh, like actually, like these things are well defined, and I think these things are well defined, and I think that anti-racism education is good, and I think that you're using conservative, but I was not using conservative buzzwords. These are things that everyone says now.
Right.
And so I was like, this is literally censorship. This is like, you don't want this opinion out there. And this is totally egregious. And this is something that everyone else is talking about, because just the discourse among the student body is even getting crazy at this point and more polarized. So we need to have these kinds of tough conversations. So that was a radicalizing experience for me. So when I got to Columbia, I was like, okay, well, I want to get involved in the political space because that's something that I want to pursue later on. How do I do that? Well, I know how to write. I've been on the school newspaper. I have a story to tell. So, you know, that's how I ended up joining the Spectator. And so in my application for the Columbia Daily Spectator opinion section, I talked about in my interview, I was like, yeah, hey, like there was this culture of censorship and suppression, and if you go on their opinion site today, my high school papers, it's like the tamest things. It's like 5 restaurants around Atlanta that you need to try, or like something stupid like that. Not stupid, but like not driving.
Yeah, there's
the
nothing
conversation.
stupid about good eating, Jonas. So slow down.
Wait, I have a question before we go to Columbia. I want to put finger on the pulse at your high school and that culture. What was the reaction with your among your fellow students or your cohort? Were they? I mean, I would imagine they were captured, like most people were at that time, or at least were exhibiting signs of being captured and signaling virtue to, mitigate any costs. But like, were there any friends of yours or any students that were on your side or defending you when you were going through this process?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right about the capture. I mean, this was the summer of the black square on Instagram, right?
Oh yeah, I know that one.
So certainly it was quickly becoming a space where people felt that it was difficult to say anything that was against the orthodoxy, anything that challenged the narrative that was being presented by the critical theory anti-racist left. But the same dynamic that we see today in other issues was emerging, in that people would come up to me privately and say, hey, like, this is actually like a reasonable point. Like, I actually agree with you on these points. And these are things that, even if I don't agree with you, we should be talking about this. I think this included the editor-in-chiefs, the co-editor-in-chiefs of the newspaper. They were like the ones liaisoning between me and the history teacher advisor. And so they actually came up to me at one point, and I think they were like, hey, like, I don't know why he's making such an issue of this. This seems like something that we should talk about. But like, he's not happy with it one way or the other. So that was certainly the dynamic there. And as you know, that this sort of dynamic of you have to maintain something publicly and something else different in private, that's very much persisted to this day. And actually, funnily enough, my friends and I in the spring semester of the senior year toyed around with starting like an alternative publication, but it was kind of like, it was low-key like gonna be like shit posting with like some like serious stuff, because like we were just so fed up with the administration at that point, and we also had like a couple months left. But there was another incident, actually, this reminds me, that we wanted to, that my friend actually wrote something about. Basically, there was we wanted to have like a debate between the young Republicans, or the young conservatives, and the young Democrats club. And this was going to be around the time of the election. We thought that this would be healthy for the school community, and this is not a large, this is like 200 people per grade, so 800 people or so in the entire high school. And so we wanted to organize this, and obviously we had to go through the club advisors and the administration, and they were just so concerned about this becoming like a whole flare up, and this becoming something that got ugly, that they like basically told us we couldn't do it in the way we wanted to do it. They're like, okay, you can have it as like a structured conversation. You can't have a debate. You have to have a structured conversation. And we can't do it now. We have to do it we have to do it later. It's like they kept pushing it, just all the logistical things. I don't know. This was also something, my experience also was something that like I think radicalized me against like academic bureaucracies, which is why I'm so glad that Sundial and even the Spectator are like independent organizations that don't really have to wait on anyone to do things. Because like, if it wasn't for them, we could just do it. We could just get a classroom, bring people together, have like 1 or 2 people moderate, and then have people debate, and everyone would show up, and it would be fine, and there'd be no need for the administration to get involved. But this was also something that was shut down. Another thing that was positive for the discourse that the administration was too scared of having. In addition, there were a couple instances of
Well, you used the air quotes, Anthony, but I will say I'm not necessarily defending the decision to like censor or try to kind of slow you guys down on that, but I get being a little nervous about a bunch of high schoolers doing a debate. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right,
there's a certain amount of sense to being nervous about that. Doesn't mean they should have hamstrung you guys, but it is like, I get it. Like, this is,
yeah, it's usually just bureaucracy operationalizing their emotion dysregulation and their own discomfort as something of moral clarity, and it's very frustrating when adults in the room don't foster that in young people, because they themselves they can't take the dissonance, and they sort of outsource their discomfort in this bubble of moral clarity, and we can't. So I don't buy that they're just part of such a bigger issue. And anyway, so you were you did have people on your side in the Republican students. There's a Republican group, but that got shut down. The debate idea got shut down. So no go for that, right?
Yeah. So your school did have a young conservatives club, but still. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It did. And even people outside the Young Conservatives Club, I mean, a lot of the people I talked to, aside from sort of the students that were very big into activism and campaigning and canvassing for the Democrats, aside from that sort of group, which we could talk about the parallels with Columbia, but aside, there were a lot of people, reasonable people that didn't want to go into political things, that weren't super political people, that had come up to me and said, hey, like, this is a good thing. This is like, we should have these conversations. Yeah, I agree with you. And it wasn't actually, this reminds me, I had written something about like, I had written an anti-affirmative action piece in the paper, and it got printed, and then the people were like sending pictures of it in like the Young Democrats group me. And they were like, "Oh, this is crazy. This is like a racist article." Or you can imagine the kinds of things they were saying.
Of course,
and
it's never creative. Yeah,
right. And then so even then there were people that were like, "Yeah, like I agree with this. This is not New York. This is Atlanta. And this is a group. This is a school that's like 15-20% Asian, and a lot of people are very like." Much in agreement on that issue, at least. So this is something that had been occurring for some time and that I was noticing a trend on.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you go through that in your high school, and then you get to Columbia, and there's a similar dynamic going on, obviously. And I want to get to that, but very quickly, I did have one short question for you. Early on, you mentioned that you had listened to conservative, like moderate conservative podcasts.
Yes,
over the
I was
summer.
wondering about that.
And I was curious, like, which podcasts were those? Were those that you were listening to? Like, I'm now like picturing a funny moment where you're like, oh, it was just like Alex Jones InfoWars or something like that. No, I'm sure it wasn't. So, like, what were you listening to? Yeah,
I listened to a lot of Coleman Hughes. I listened to a lot of him. He was
Likewise.
very, very good that year. I actually, a couple of my friends had like been like roped into listening to Ben Shapiro, and so I'll give him a try, like see what he's talking about. His stuff on like race and identity actually was very good and like very moderate in my opinion. And it was very, very data driven. So I enjoyed a lot of that. I started reading things like City Journal and things like Quillette, which Coleman had written for, and just really like discovering sort of this space and hearing seasoned people talk about it from a very informed perspective.
That's interesting. I was getting into that same stuff about the same time you were, Jonas, but this sort of reveals my age and how much younger you are than I am. But I was in the UK, like in the Air Force, stuck at home, unable to go to work because of lockdowns, doing the same thing. So that's funny. Coleman Hughes is great. Quillette is awesome. Yeah, very interesting.
It's all the same for me too. Same stuff.
And you just and you describe them as moderate right, and I'm not even sure. I feel like they're almost like in the middle, and they like Quillette, hosts a range of different voices. Coleman is like, I guess you could say he's moderate right, but almost more again just like normal liberal,
Teeters,
right.
moderate. You know what I mean? So that's interesting. I guess it's a matter of perspective to some degree, but yeah. So let's move on to your
Cambodia University.
Cambodia
University.
Let's go.
What's French for blue? The Khmer something like what's the pun there?
Khmer Rouge. Wait, I'm not
Khmer
saying
Rouge is red. Is
Isn't it
rouge
just
is
blue?
Yeah. I think it is blue. Yeah, Khmer blue, because that's the colors of Colombia. Anyway, I'm
Oh,
sorry, that
that's
was
crazy.
stupid. Khmer blue. Yeah, so you get to Colombia, and then like I was mentioning earlier, you joined up with Spec. That's the Columbia Spectator. For those who don't know, we just call it Spec. Pretty early on, was it like your freshman year? Is that right?
I applied the beginning of my freshman spring. So it was my freshman spring semester and sophomore fall semester that I was on the opinion staff.
And what was your experience like there? Did Spec? I guess I don't even know that much. Did it always have a reputation for being pretty left wing? I mean, I assume it did, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. I mean, especially the years that we were there, like, that accelerated. But I think they had
Oh,
always had
definitely.
a
Yeah.
reputation. I think I think they were known previously for publishing more balance, I think, in the past. But that sort of all went away around the time that I had left, which coincided with a number of different political actions. But yeah, I mean, I had got to Columbia. I was expecting this robust intellectual environment, um, where people would want to talk about the issues of the day openly, and then you would encounter people who agreed and disagreed with you, and then you'd all be friends at the end of the day. Obviously, that didn't happen for the most part, my freshman year at least. I met a ton of people on the far left. I met a ton of just people that were like lived near me, right? So like that's the thing about freshman year. You don't really you get somewhat of a say in where you live, but you're just assigned, and you just meet a ton of people based on proximity. And it does take some time sometimes to find people that are true like friends and that are going to be good intellectual matches and things like that.
Yeah.
So I had encountered that, and I tried to be honest and open with people, and that obviously didn't really end well, and a lot of people didn't want to talk to me and be friends with me because they're like, oh, he's like a Republican, he's a conservative, or something like that, fascist, or things like that, or transphobic or whatever. I was there was a
Well, if
person
the shoe
who
fits, Jonas, I don't know what to tell
Yeah.
you.
Well, I'd imagine that some of the topics were not even that inflammatory. I would imagine that they were, like we were saying before, even moderate, perhaps, because I've found that for me, it doesn't even matter if it's the slightest in the middle. It's automatically fascist or Republican, which signals fascism.
Right, right. I remember I was in this reminds me of an anecdote. I was in DC last summer for a weekend. I was living in New York working for the Free Press, but I came down to DC for one weekend, and it happened to be DC Pride weekend, and so everyone was out and about. This was a weekend night, and we were in line for a bar. I was with my friend Adam, who was doing like an AEI, American Enterprise Institute summer program, and we were in line, and we struck up a conversation with these guys in front of us, um, and they're like asking us what we're doing, where we work, and like Adam's like, oh, I'm doing like this AEI program, and they're like, AEI, isn't that like fascist? And I'm like, this is a free market think tank. In what world is that like
My
anywhere
God.
near fat? I don't know. That was a very funny moment that I'll remember.
Well, I mean, I think
But
we can all
yeah.
agree that the meanings of words often get muddled, right? Where people say fascist to mean something that's like really a free market capitalist is like fascist. That doesn't make any sense,
I just think
Right.
people are dumb
Yeah.
when it comes to things, just generally.
Yeah,
When it
yeah,
comes to these, it's just like, it's like,
like-
can we,
yeah.
I can't, my God, it's like people don't understand, a lot of people don't understand half the things that come out of their mouths. I mean, when it comes to this stuff, and it compounds on itself, and it just reiterates and iterates, and it just becomes that much more coagulated, and you can't even interface with people who hold true to these just shorthands, and you say one thing and then automatically they're just regulated, and that hasn't changed, I don't think, and we could get into that at some other point. I don't think that kind of behavior has changed. I think it has actually increased quite a bit. And so when you went to you went to this pride event in line for getting into a bar, and these people, you said they were with you, or they were not
They were
with you?
just
You knew
They were just random
Oh, okay,
people in
okay.
in
Because
DC.
that would
Yeah.
okay, got it. Yeah, because that would because you never know when you're with people too, and they know you pretty well. Also, it's surprising sometimes that they'll go down that rabbit hole with you.
Oh
But
yeah,
the
and
strangers.
that's
So
the
that's
other thing. That's the other thing that I experienced at Columbia,
yeah.
but also in various other environments. It's that like these casual conversations will
Yeah.
just turn political so quickly. And I
It's
think
so true.
part of that is because I do blame the left for this, and here's why. I think that the left, their strategy has been to insert their ideology into everyday discourse, and that the way they say words and things like that. What they've done very well at is attacking language and saying that there are correct and wrong ways to say things. There are morally correct things. There are bigoted ways to say things, and there's like anti-racist ways to say things, right? So you'll be talking about something totally not political, and they'll insert the people on the left, especially at Columbia. They really did tend to insert side comments or certain words and phrases that were overtly political.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a good example of this. I mean, I think the most common example would be just like random denigrating jokes about Republicans and about Trump and things like that. And they're like, ah, Trump, so funny, like Trump supporters, so dumb, right? It's like you'll be talking about something totally unrelated, and they'll decide to like insert some kind of comment like that. Or even like I think even pronouns I think could be fit into this, right? Where you're having a conversation about, you know, someone and they're like, oh, actually they go by they them pronouns or whatever. There's all sorts of examples that I think you could think of the way the left challenges sort of discourse, or just automatically assuming that certain things are good, like, you know, protesting and social justice and things like, you know, corporations and free markets and things like that are
That's a big one,
automatically
actually. I think that's a
connotated
big
as
one.
bad.
Right.
So it's very, very subtle, and it's hard to, I think, describe with the full color it deserves without like an actual conversation with someone like this. But that is something that I've noticed, and so your options as someone that disagrees with these things is to either A, stay silent and let them continue and assume that you agree with them. And that's the thing. The assumption is always that everyone around me agrees with me because it's the morally correct position and it's the righteous position. And so I'm going to talk as if it is. And it would be like you're having a conversation with people about, you know, you would just mention like, oh, the sky is blue, or, you know,
Like
the certain historical events happened, or anything like that. Yeah.
or water is
But
wet,
I think
and
that
then
is
people
what water
freak out.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you know, the left has done this with things like, you know, things like transgenderism and things like identity issues, and, you know, things about politics and Republicans and conservatives and things like that. So that
Yeah, I
is
think
definitely something that I
that-
quickly experienced, and yeah, part of my motivation for joining the newspaper.
That's really interesting, Jonas, because last episode I said, like, super briefly, like, I think that, you know, the culture of free speech is just as important as the legal protections, arguably. And I think that's because, and you were talking about, you came to Columbia hoping to find an atmosphere where people could disagree in the open, not take it personally, still be friends, respect the fact that people have different perspectives, blah, 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 blah. That really comes down to a culture of free speech, an open mind, which, you know, in and of itself is entails like open-mindedness, right? And so what you're describing here is creating this sort of moral paradigm where if you disagree, you're bad. And like you were saying, people either have to like lie about what they believe, or stay silent, or kind of isolate themselves in silos where they can talk to the other people that can handle what they're saying and not interact with anyone else. And it has this like extreme chilling effect, which is, I'm assuming, kind of this thing that you were running into at Columbia that was extremely frustrating, where it's like, well, I came here to like talk about ideas and maybe even ruffle some feathers and it's all good. But that ability, that cultural kind of element of open discourse and free speech is so important, because even if it's like technically allowed by Colombia's rules, legally it's allowed, all that. If people aren't willing to because they're afraid to pay the social price, it's the same almost. It has the same effect of chilling conversation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have a distinct memory. This was my freshman fall. It was one of those late night dorm drinking parties.
What do you mean?
And
You
by the
never
way,
drank
this
in
was
the
like
dorms? That's crazy. He's
yes,
joking.
I would never drink underage. No, never.
No, I've never seen you have a drink underage, Jonas. That's true.
This was COVID. This was COVID still too as well. And so the RAs had been instructed to police the hallways, and you had to wear your mask inside, right? If you weren't in your room, you were meant to wear a mask. And so we were having these like illegal gatherings with like illegal alcohol, which at one point we did get caught because like the door, like someone like walked out of the room as an RA, basically the RAs didn't care except for a couple that were on power trips. One of them like walked by as the door opened and saw that we were like drinking and like had an unauthorized gathering and like shut it down. But there was one of these nights I was in a room just sitting having a drink with some people. And I don't even know. This is the thing with these situations. I never know how it turns political. So yeah, your options are either to like stay silent and let them sort of dominate the discourse with their paradigms, or B, you can speak up and be like, hey, I kind of agree with that. I actually don't think that what you're saying is bad, or, what's so wrong with, being a conservative or supporting or working for a corporation or supporting this XYZ company or person. And then the entire conversation obviously derails from them. They attack you for that and they go after you for that. That is very, very common. Yeah, I was sitting in a room and there was this person, and the topic of transgender people had come up, and I had expressed some skepticism with, hormone treatments, which Anthony, you've written about extensively and you've talked about on social media extensively. And I had expressed some skepticism of how effective that was, and whether this movement had gotten like out of hand, whether the wave of youth people wanting to transition was that actually happening, or was that a product of something else on social media or mental health, or simply people that are actually gay who experience mental health issues or other things in their life that make them think that they are transgender when in reality they're not. I mean, what percent of people are growing out of this? All of these questions that, have now been raised since then. I had brought up maybe one or two of them because they were operating under the assumption that like anyone who proclaims, that they're a certain gender is that gender and they should be given any and all medical treatments to help them achieve that. And I was like, oh wait, hold on a second. I don't know that would be reasonable. And that derailed the conversation, and I thought actually it was like an interesting conversation. Like no one was like going after me. This is like people were freshmen. They were not like totally radicalized into the culture of censorship and cancel culture yet. But sophomore year, this person ended up living in the suite next to me in the dorm that we were in. And I believe they ended up coming out as transgender and undergoing treatment and things like that, and presenting as the opposite gender. And I actually didn't know that they lived like next to me. And so people from that suite invited one of my suite mates to the party. Oh, they bring your entire suite. We're throwing this party tonight. This was like sophomore fall or something. And we had shown up, and I was there for like a couple minutes. And then one of the people that lived there like pulled me aside and was like, I need to ask you something. Like, are you transphobic? Because like somebody told me that you are, and like you can't be here if you are. It was like that kind of. I was like, well, I'm not. What do you mean I'm transphobic? What? Who is telling you these things?
Because of your opinions about the treatment.
Right. Yeah. And so I was like, I haven't talked about this like with, and then it sort of like clicked that like, oh, it's all coming from like this conversation that we had like a year ago.
Right.
It's like, I haven't talked about this in so long, and this is not something that I'm like, this is like not one of the, I mean, this is not something that I feel like I was known for on campus at the time, right?
It's not the hill you're dying
This is
on.
not the hill I'm like, I care about a lot of things, and I'm like generally conservative, but like, I don't know. It was just, that was kind of the first experience I had where like things like that sort of followed me.
Yeah, well,
Obviously I know why they said that, and looking back, it's like obvious because this has been the case on Twitter. And Anthony, you probably could talk better than I can about being called transphobic and things like that for just certain beliefs, often based in science, that you have. So
I just turned my head the other way and I'm called that. Yeah. I mean, it's
right,
not really,
yeah.
it's not that hard to trigger that in someone. Yeah. It's
Oh
insane.
yeah, you got called all sorts of things on side chat after your article about
Such a funny name, side chat, eye, side chat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
it's like literally
whatever.
bringing someone. It evokes bringing someone off to the side to talk shit about someone who's still in the room, right? No,
Yeah,
but
whatever.
what's so crazy about that experience to me, Jonas, is just like the idea that like, we all I think broadly agree, maybe with some daylight, but not much about the transgender issue, and like, this idea that like, hey, we should just be really skeptical of like, performing surgeries or giving hormones or puberty blockers to minors because it's hard to tell, what their thought process is, what they're really going through. Like, perfectly reasonable thing. You're not even necessarily in that breath saying you should never do it or something. It's just like, hey, well, the research isn't actually super clear. It's very opaque. It's not, the standard isn't normally what you'd expect for that kind of treatment. And like that might horribly offend someone, but like the idea that means that you would like go to a party and then be like, oh, are you transgender? And then like point and be like, that's wrong. I hate, that's crazy. It's like,
right,
people,
exactly.
It's like take another hot button issue like abortion. There are people simultaneously at parties all the time, every day, where one person thinks abortion is murder and the other person thinks that like restricting abortion is completely sexist. In my humble opinion, both of them kind of have a point, maybe. And they don't like go up to each other and scream at each other about like killing babies or restricting women's rights, right? Like that doesn't happen.
Right, yeah.
Like people can just hang out and put that stuff to the side. Even if you were like transphobic, quote unquote, that doesn't mean you'd go up to a trans person and be like, you're terrible,
Right. If you're at like a party at Columbia University, like you're not really going to be able to tell who has what political opinions and whether you agree with them, and whether if you had known in advance you would disinvite them. I think it's ridiculous. People who didn't know what I stood for had great times with me during our 4 years at university. And then later they would like disinvite me from things because they would like, oh, like he's like pro-Israel and things like that. This happened distinctly like senior year as well. Like there was this like party that some of my suite mates friends were throwing in the same building actually. And they were like, oh, like bring your suite mates, like bring everyone, it's totally open. And so they send the party full. And I like RSVP yes, which was a mistake. And they saw my name, and then they texted my friend. They texted my student. They're like, "Hey, like we're not comfortable having Jonas at this party because he's so outspoken on this like Israel." She's like, you think we're gonna go to this party and talk about like Israel and Palestine? Like, what do you think? Is that your idea of fun? Because that's not my idea of fun, right? So it's like this kind of culture where it's like beliefs that you hold can totally taint you or make you as a moral being is so ridiculous and so polarizing, and it's really what's pushed people to the right. It's really what's driven a lot of the cultural shifts that we've seen.
And you're right, Jonas, for saying this is specific to the left. This type of, I'm not saying that authoritarian tendencies, behaviors, proclivities, authoritarianism is just on its own. It's independent of political ideology. But this particular behavior that you just mentioned is specific to the left. And especially on a college campus. I mean, you'd mentioned that you go to a party and you can't really judge, I'm paraphrasing what you said, what your political party is. But it's to some degree, I guess the onus is on us, those of us who dissent and who want to break through the rigidity. I'm not reprimanding any of us. I'm just saying that to some degree, I was in kind of on high alert in certain spaces thinking I'm probably in the minority, because there is such thing as the false consensus effect, that bias where we think that everyone thinks the way we do. But it's probably true that most people think that way at Columbia. Would you say that, or do you think? And I want to kind of segue into like what was the straw that broke the camel's back to start Sundial, and perhaps like is this an area of convergence, thinking, oh my God, there are actually people who don't think like these people I've interacted with, and I want to be a voice for more voices. So I'm like, what would you make of all that?
Yeah, I think that in terms of your question about are most people like this, we have to distinguish between different parts of the student body.
Yeah.
So this is a school with an undergraduate population of, I don't know, 8,000 or something. And so obviously not everyone is going to be super political or informed about political things or even that polarized. But obviously in the discourse and on social media, it's a handful of those people that are creating the perception of the entire student body. So I would distinguish between the political community and the non-political community. So the political community is people that are actively involved. I mean, they're not necessarily poli-sci majors and people who want to do things like journalism and activism full time, but they're people that associate around those people, and they're in that sort of network.
Right.
And this would include the core of it, right? The people that write for the publications, the people that are on the political union, the people that are on the political review, the people that are in student government for sure, the people that are on the club governing boards, club leadership for things that are sort of political causes, and they're close friends. These are the people in which I think you're right, Anthony. The majority of people do think this way, and they do behave this way. But these experiences, I think, are so radicalizing for people that they think that this is sort of how most people act in this school. But I don't
right.
think most people in this school, I think half of the school, at least half the school, is not in sort of what we would call the political community. There's people there that just want to get their degrees and go on to get a job later on that has nothing to do with politics.
Or
So-
if they have political opinions, they're not extreme or they're open-minded. It's like they're not completely apolitical, but they're not like
right.
sociopathic about it, you know?
Yeah,
not fu- they're not
they're usually
fused.
moderates.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not fused to their
identity-
views. Right.
Right.
They can distinguish between the two, which actually, just on a side note, there is a construct in psychology, identity fusion, where, just to inject this into the conversation, these sort of half the people that we're kind of conjecturing or thinking exist as very rigid. There's research that shows that pretty well that certain people like this can't distinguish between themselves and the views they hold. Like, there's no daylight. It's not like social identity where, hey, I don't agree with abortion, but, there's some other things here that I'm fine with. Somebody that's more flexible, or who identifies with a sporting team but doesn't fuse to it. So it's actually an interesting point of interest to mark this, what you're explaining as people who really cannot distinguish between self and identity of the group that they belong to. So that could be it too.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's really interesting, Anthony. Do you know anything about how specifically they're measuring that? Do they ask people, like, describe yourself and things like that? Like, do you know how are they measuring your identity fusion degree?
Yes, so I'm a little rusty on it, but there is a huge study on it that I'm going to cover at some point, and I'm just going to give the very quick version of it because it's an interesting point to, like I said, bring into the discussion as it pertains to Columbia, and you'll see why. The long and short of the study that I'll talk about now is they found that American and UK students fused to Palestinians more than another group in the Middle East who was going through a symmetrical war, and so they weren't considered oppressed per se. But they fused with Palestinians because of their oppression status. Then they did another experiment, taking Palestinians completely out of it, and used the other country or other group in the Middle East and applied what was going on with the Palestinians to that group, and they fused to that group. So really what it came down to was oppression status. They fused to groups that had that similarity, or they, as they believed, a similarity between their oppression status and the group's oppression status. And that's what created the fusion between the two groups. It wasn't really about the hardship per se. It was about how they identified with the group in those very distinct ways. I don't know if that was clear, but was that clear or was that not clear?
Oh yeah, that's clear. That's fascinating
Yeah,
because
because it
that's
pertains to
you're
Colombia too.
right,
So
because you're linking what I'm hearing is that this study and what you just talked about is linking the sort of oppression Olympics, people that
that's
go
right.
to sort of the most privileged institutions and are among the most privileged of this country, trying to find ways to claim oppression and claim intersectional identities
That's right.
that
Yeah.
grant them solidarity with the globally oppressed. You're connecting that idea with the idea of being ideologically rigid and the impact that has on discourse, which I
Right.
think is super interesting, right? So it's the same thing that I think the same phenomenon causes people to both view themselves as one with their political values and opinions, and view themselves as one with the globally oppressed. And that has impacts across their politics and across the discourse.
Right.
That's where you get these videos you'll see on social media, a lot of like someone interviewing people on the street and saying something like, well, would you want to live in Palestine? Like, don't you know they'd throw you off a roof? Or why would you want to go to Iran? Like, you think Iran is so much better than the US? They would put you in prison for not wearing a head covering, and
Right.
you get this sort of dissonance between like the perceived, or I should say the expressed values of like feminism and liberalism, and then supporting a regime that is diametrically opposed to many of those views, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah. They don't
absolutely.
get.
And
They
it's
really don't give
because
a
they're
shit about. They don't
it's
give a shit
because
about Yeah.
right, like
Go on.
Iran is
Sorry, Clay.
perceived. No, it's fine. The Iran is perceived. Palestinians are perceived. Some more or less, rightly or wrongly, depending on the case. But all of them are perceived, at the very least, as like the oppressed, the less powerful, and therefore that comes with a certain amount of virtue, intrinsic to that status, right? And
Yeah.
then,
They don't
like
see
you
the.
said, like
Go on. Sorry.
a sense of connection to that, because they also
Yeah.
perceive themselves as being lower on that like metaphorical totem pole, right?
And I think we all saw that.
A metaphor
I
I might get in trouble for with a certain group of people.
yeah. I think we all saw that at Columbia, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right? Needless to say, it was prevalent as hell. But I'm curious. So, like, what was, like I said before, what was the straw that broke the camel's back? If you're cool, moving on to Sundial.
Yeah, let's do that.
What was the like? I gotta do this.
Yeah. So for all of the things that we just talked about, all of the reasons we just talked about, I decided to join The Spectator, and that was my whole thing. I didn't hide who I was. I told them, yeah, I'm like more moderate. I, have some right-leaning opinions, but I think that what's important to me is improving the culture of discourse. And so, I joined The Spectator, and while the opinion editor that year was actually very good about promoting alternative perspectives and perspectives on the right, and had actually gotten a couple of things that I wanted to get published by people in the community that were also similar to me ideologically. That's not the direction the future of the publication was moving. And I think if you look at the opinion content from 2022 versus 2023 and 4 and 5, it's very, very different. It gets way, way more far left, and you start getting a real absence of alternative voices. And so what I saw there was that the people that had joined, the freshmen and sophomores that had joined alongside me, they weren't really interested in discourse. They were interested in opinion journalism as pure activism, as, they were interested in only promoting the things that the causes and the people that they saw as oppressed, or promoting a social justice good, or some end like that. And if an opinion was pitched and it went against that, then you were shunned, and you would be silently called out. And so I had pitched something. They do these they do these like identitarian like special editions or whatever, right? So they had one for like, I think they do like a Pride edition every fall or something like that, or maybe it's in the spring, I forget. But they were like, oh, like what are some like unique perspectives that we can like opinion pieces we can commission on like for like the Pride special issue. And so I was like, everyone was doing like the normal things, right? Like overcoming like how this like insert LGBT person on campus overcame insert LGBT related struggle on campus related vaguely to, you know, homophobia or transphobia or whatever. Um, so then I was like, okay, well, I have an idea. Let's talk about how not all LGBT people are on the progressive left. I think that would be a really interesting and unique perspective, and I would love to read that. And people were like rolling their eyes and giving me the side eye. This was still when it was the old opinion editor, and she was like, "This is a great idea. Let's do this. Who do you have in mind?" I didn't really have anyone in mind actually. I had met Anthony. That was the problem, and so that was a major experience for me, I think. And so, you know, there were a lot of moments like that where I just felt like this wasn't a publication that was dedicated to the kinds of things that I had joined doing it, even if that year it was possible to. And it was clear, I think, that the publication's leadership was moving in a direction that would be even less conducive to promoting pluralism and healthy discourse. So there was I had an opportunity in December of 2022 to help lead a new publication on campus, and that was the Columbia Independent, and they offered me a job there. They offered me the managing editor position, and so I decided, you know, screw it, I'm gonna leave, and I'm gonna start this new thing that I'm gonna have a lot more editorial control over, and that I'll be able to have much more of an impact with, and I'll do that. Now, the Columbia Independent lasted for less than a year. It fell apart due to numerous sort of internal tensions and disagreements over what the mission was to be. But in the process, we had recruited a wonderful cohort of writers and editors, many of them former Spectator people, that were interested in the mission that I thought I was joining for, which was promoting free speech, promoting pluralism, encouraging viewpoint diversity, and getting people to just talk about issues again, and having like opinion journalism that actually just challenges people instead of coddling them with things that they only agree with. And so we had gotten together this great group, which was the foundation for the Columbia Sundial. And so when I returned from studying abroad in the end of 2023, in the beginning of 2024, we got this group together after sort of a collapse of the Independent, and we were like, okay, let's try this again. Let's do this the proper way, and let's set up a real heterodox magazine that's going to do the things that we're talking about. And so that was the birth of the Sundial.
Haha,
Yeah.
magazine. Sorry.
That's
I
funny.
see.
I'm
It's
gonna
in the
use that
subtext.
from now on.
I'm sorry.
Magazine.
I ruined your apex there. That's beautiful. That's a great
Damn, that was
story,
good,
though.
Anthony. How is that the first time I've heard that in any context? That's brilliant.
Oh yeah.
That's a great pun. Yeah, I remember. Just briefly, like I remember that because I signed up for the Independent to like I think were you in Cambridge at the time? You were in England.
I was at Oxford. Yeah, I was at Oxford in
yeah.
the fall of 2023. Yeah.
So I had joined up in the fall. I guess it would have been then the fall of 2023 to like start writing, and I was like, oh, I'm back into college. It'll be fun to like write, and I want to write for a publication just like you, Jonas, that like where I can like have a crazy idea or something that's a little more controversial and write about it and all that. And then it quickly fell apart. Like as soon as I got there, the whole thing imploded. And then I think it was Amon like reached out to me and poached me for Sundial, and I'm so glad that happened because I had such a fun time at Sundial. So yeah, but so you found this campus magazine, and it is still going. It has not imploded. It's actually doing quite well from what I can tell. What was your experience getting that off the ground, and what did that feel like? What challenges did you run into? What surprised you about doing it? Yeah, just like your thoughts on kind of starting that.
It was definitely a slow start. Part of it was because campus protest kept happening, and we kept having to change how we covered things and what we were writing about. And we did have a small staff at first. We had maybe 10 people that were active, active probably less than that, actually. And so for putting together a print publication, it's really hard to do that on a regular basis with only that number of staff. And so we were constantly going around trying to write and recruit and add people and to figure out what our mission was going to be. And so we ended up putting out an issue at the end of the semester, the April-May issue of 2024, our launch issue, which included all of the protest content, essentially up until Hamilton. We printed it like the same day that Hamilton happened, so that did not make it in. But I think it was extremely inspiring, to answer your question about the process, because even if it was a small group, it was people that were extremely committed to the work of the publication. And you could sense it because people were going out of their way to pitch articles. Everyone was constantly thinking of new ideas. They were recruiting their friends to join. They were giving us tons and tons of ideas, and it very much did feel like a startup culture. It's like, oh, like we want to pursue this initiative, like, okay, who can lead that, right? Very, very scrappy, not unlike the Free Press, actually. And so it took some time to get off the ground, but after our first issue and throughout the summer, and especially after recruiting a ton of people in the fall, the publication really, really picked up and accelerated and became known around campus. And I think has, like, all things considered, like a great reputation. Obviously, there's people that are going to call it MAGA and fascist and conservative and whatnot. But I think, again, this goes back to our discussion of the loud people versus the normies, right? I think that, yeah, the loud people probably don't like it very much, but, we're not necessarily trying to convert people who don't want to be converted or reach people who don't want to read things that they disagree with. And
Right.
so on that end, I think we have absolutely succeeded. There's people that see us truly as an innovative organization that is unafraid to publish things that are going to cause controversy, that are going to stir up conversation, and that, yeah, might offend some people. And at the end of the day, the writing is still good quality. Everything is heavily edited and fact-checked for accuracy. To my knowledge, we haven't had to issue any kind of major correction yet, and that's, I think, a testament to how robust our copy editing process is. And so, what we've learned is that the important thing is that, one, you need to have good writing. You need to have good writers, and you need to have good editors that are committed to publishing quality journalism over all else, over any kind of promoting any kind of political ideology. And second of all, you really do need to, have the mission drive everything that you do, right? Is this pitch, is this article, is this initiative advancing the cause of pluralism, or is it not? And that's driven a lot of that drove my decisions while I was editor-in-chief. And I'm hoping that it continues to drive their decisions and their growth as they continue without us.
Yeah, I think we left it in good hands. I think you left it in good hands, right? Because a lot of the I'll say, like, when I first started, I think my writing got so much better literally in the course of months. Like I was editing pieces for a lot of the newer guys that are on there, guys and gals that are on the staff now, and noticing all the same mistakes that I was making and thinking, oh, it's because I've been doing this for like a year that now I've gotten so much better at writing, and I can tell all of these kids are super bright and are going to be, just as good, probably better than I ever was, right? And so that gives you a lot of confidence. Like everyone that I saw that was new that came on right as we were graduating seemed super bright. So yeah, I think the Sundial's got a bright future on Columbia's campus, and I think it's going to end up generating the careers really for more than a few good journalists, yourself included, Jonas, because you now work for, and I've been very dorkily pointing to my hat every time it's been mentioned, the Free Press. A quick anecdote: Jonas was very kind to Anthony and I, and when we were all attending the Free Press debates, it was on should America be the world's policeman? I think that was something like that. And it was with who was there? It was Matt Taibbi.
Mm-hmm.
Who was it? Jamie Kerr. Oh,
Jamie something. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm totally drawing a blank.
Was it Brett? Was Brett Stevens there?
Brett Stevens was there.
Oh yeah. He was, and the Jamie.
Why can I
remember his last name?
Kirk? Why am
Jamie
I blanking on
Kirchek?
Kirchick. I wanted to
No,
say
no, no.
Kirkpatrick for some reason. I knew that was wrong. It was Jamie Kirchick, who we also got to see another time, who I think is great. But anyway,
right.
We went to this free press debate, and Jonas, you were already working for the free press, and were kind enough you to get us in to the after party, and so I got a free hat there. That I'm wearing now. I thought it would be appropriate for the conversation. I also didn't want to mess with my hair this morning, so I'm wearing a hat. And we had a great time, man. It was super fun. We got to briefly meet Barry Weiss, which was great, and I had a great conversation with Uri Berliner for a little bit, and got a great, really warm hug from Nellie Bowles, which was great. When I told her that I loved her book, which I did. So anyway, I'm done gushing. It was a great time. But so you work for the Free Press now. You've moved to DC to kind of help staff the bureau they've got down there, the office.
Mm-hmm.
What has that been like for you so far? Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah, it's been a wonderful, I think, a little over a year now at the company. I started as an intern last summer. I actually started a little bit before I was supposed to start because of all the things going on at Columbia, so I did a ton of video stuff for them there. But it's been really, really exciting, and I think I made the right decision in terms of choosing to work for the Free Press instead of doing something else or working for another media organization. And the reason is because journalism has been done like the way digital journalism even has been stagnating, has been done the way it's been done for a really long time. And a lot of it hasn't really adapted to changing readership trends and to changing readership sensibilities even, especially in the last 5 years with all of the political changes that we've seen. And that's created a lot of problems in the media. I think that when the Free Press talks about the legacy media and the flaws with it, I think they're absolutely correct in terms of the ideological flaws. For example, right, like journalism used to be something that working class people it used to not be an elite job. It used to be a working class job. And then sometime in the later 20th century, that shifted and, coincided with the explosion in the knowledge economy and the explosion of symbolic capitalist and, to an extent, elite overproduction. I think a lot of people wanting to go into this role.
A lot of great, really good $3 heterodox words there.
Oh yeah,
like symbolic capitalist.
I hope your readers understand. But yeah, this interest in people who go to college educated people, usually good colleges, that want to participate in the economy built around ideas and the exchange of knowledge. Rather than simply the production of goods and services. So what happened was journalism became this Ivy League dominated field, especially the prestige newspapers, the New York Times, the Washington Post. All of these places, these people are all college educated now, and they all went to great schools, and as a result, they have elitist sensibilities, right? They're on the progressive left, usually. And that oftentimes means that they're more interested in advancing an ideological agenda rather than serving the readers and really pushing the envelope forward in terms of the contents and the opinions that they're publishing. So this is exactly why Barry Weiss resigned in 2020 after the staff wanted them to take down, in my opinion, actually reasonable op-ed by Senator Tom Cotton saying, let's send in the National Guard to quell these protests. Looking back, obviously, given the sort of ICE raids and protests against them that have happened this year, I mean, the backlash is nowhere near as strong in terms of involving the National Guard. So it's so interesting to see how crazy things got that year. But anyways, she resigned because the entire staff was up in arms over this op-ed, and it's an op-ed. This is not a piece. We're not claiming that this is the right opinion. This is just something that a U.S. senator believes and that we should platform. And then if you go on there, you'll still see the ridiculous editor's note that they appended, which is this put many of our staff in harm's way, or something like that. Was a lot of the staff's justification, right? This puts Black New York Times staffers at risk of violence and things like that. And it's just this is very 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 emblematic of the problem of the mainstream media. And so being at the Free Press is means being in a newsroom where everyone is extremely conscious of that. Everyone is extremely conscious of the flaws of the legacy media and is working every day towards building a company and promoting and producing journalism that goes against that sort of prevailing narrative. And so it's really been great. I just graduated Columbia, like, what is it, like a month and a half ago, and it's really a privilege to be able to spend my days, not even, I'm not even, beholden to the daily news cycle. I like check Twitter and stuff and I keep up with what's happening, but I don't have to, I'm not like a breaking news reporter. So it really is a privilege to be able to spend every day thinking really, really critically about the bigger questions and the bigger issues that are shaping our politics and our culture. And I get to pitch these amazing think pieces and sense making pieces that are going to help our readers understand better what is going on in the world, rather than just covering breaking news or just writing, here's what happened and here are the facts. And so being at a company that allows me to do that, I think is really a privilege, and it's been a really great time so far.
That's good to hear. Yeah, I won't get into the specifics of it, but I just started a job at a company that's like kind of still got that startup culture too, and it really makes a difference. It's so much better to be a part of something innovative, which is what I'm feeling now, and what I have to imagine is the air at the Free Press. What it feels like still. But yeah, so you're allowed to pitch all of these ideas and pursue these interesting lines of research and what's the word I'm looking for? Or just, pursue inquiry. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Inquiry. So that leads me to the next obvious question, Jonas, which is, what are you looking into right now? Is there anything you've been working on that is going to get published or has been published, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, so we can talk a little bit about my piece coming out this weekend, which will be out by the time you guys hear this episode.
This will probably drop. Actually, let me look at the thing. What is it? I guess two weeks from now, just about a week or two from now. So yeah, it'll be out. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
Okay. Well, the first piece I'm writing as a full-time employee at the Free Press is, or I guess as a non-intern at the Free Press, I would say. It's this piece about, so last weekend, so July 4th weekend, I went to this party in DC. This was a party that was hosted by the same people that hosted some of the giant inauguration parties back in January. And famously, the New York Magazine covered this party. And they had a writer go along with them, and it was the cover story of whatever issue that was. And the cover was this picture of these beautiful, gorgeous Trump supporters having the time of their life at this inauguration ball. And the headline was "The Cruel Kids Table. The new young right, contemplates cultural domination," or something that was like vaguely critical. And so the piece, the cover, there were no black people, there were no minorities in the cover. The reality was that there were black people in the corner of the image, but they had cropped it so that it only showed the white people. Whether that was intentional or not, it sparked a lot of backlash when that was revealed that they had cropped out the black people. But moreover, in the story, the writer had written, it's like MAGA 2.0 is almost entirely white. And it's like, oh, you look at the cover, okay, maybe that makes sense. And so the organizer of that event actually was black. And he was like really pissed off by that. So he's like, they accused me of throwing an all-white party, so I'm going to throw an all-white party. And so this was a dress code all-white party that he was throwing on Independence Day weekend in DC. And it was called the Cruel Kid Summer Soiree.
Oh my God, I love that.
It was like actually the most overstimulated I felt in like a very long time. It was, last Saturday was a scorching hot Saturday here in DC. The AC in the building, I think, was broken, so it was also swelteringly hot in the room, which contributed probably to all of this. But it was like, probably the one of the most beautiful collections of people I've ever seen in my life at this like penthouse loft in a neighborhood about a couple miles from Capitol Hill, all gathered there, all in all white. All of the women had, perfect blowouts, and the men were wearing, white pants, white polo shirt, linen shirts, and everyone was there basically to celebrate what they were calling MAGA Summer. I talked to so many people there. I talked to a lot of MAGA so-called influencers, a lot of social media personalities, and a lot of people that were just there for a good time about like, what does MAGA Summer mean to you? Do you actually support the president? What are you supporting? What specifically do you support? What's driving your support? And so essentially I wrote a scene piece based on what I saw there. And my conclusion is that more than anything, MAGA in Trump 2.0 is a cultural phenomenon. It's a cultural movement more than any politics or policy. And what is the culture of MAGA? The culture is, first of all, being totally unafraid to share your beliefs and to speak about them in the open, in contrast to all the things that we have been talking about. When I asked people what they valued most, and it essentially that's what it boiled down to. It was free speech, being able to share your opinions, and patriotism, right? Being unafraid to, and that's sort of in line with free speech, being unafraid to express love and support for America, which I think is really important. So these were the first things that were mentioned almost every time, I think. And then I asked people, oh, then like, what about like actual policy though? And that, that was sort of less well defined. Border security was the most commonly mentioned one. People talked about the economy for a little bit. Someone talked about welfare benefits. But by and large, it was for these people that are, I think it was mainly an under 30 party. Everyone was in their like early to late 20s. It was about celebration. It was about celebrating their victories so far and being proud to be associated with this. And so that wasn't like totally what I expect. I mean, I had a sense that was one big part of it, but I didn't know that the backlash against the progressive left and their culture of censorship and political correctness would manifest in such a striking way. And so that's essentially what the piece is about. And, I end by commenting on, is this the desire to simply, have fun, have a great time and celebrate? Is that so different than the culture if this was like a left-wing party, for instance, right? And so if you think about the summer trends from the last 2 years, there was like, what last summer was Brat, right? And then the year there was like Girl Boss a couple years ago, and sort of all of these left wing.
Don't forget there was like a white boy
trends.
summer in there somewhere. Chet Hanks, do you remember that white boy summer?
I do not remember that.
What? Oh my god!
There was a white boy summer.
There was a white boy summer.
That would fly today.
And Tom Hanks's. Oh, this was just a couple years ago, Jonas. And Tom Hanks's son Chet Hanks released a song called "White Boy Summer," and it was kind of good. It was kind of good. So we'll include a link to that. But don't forget about White Boy Summer, dude.
Okay.
But, so what you're saying though is it's just vibes. People are sick of the nagginess and the negativity of what is of the left, kind of more broadly speaking, which is problematic because it's an overgeneralized term, but of the Democrats, right? And are just wanting to find a home where they can be positive and patriotic and feel good about being American. Is it really just that simple?
Yeah. That is the core of it. That is what people value the most. Because I think that, if you believe in that, there's a really good chance that you also believe in other things that the president is doing, the administration is doing, right? Like, we should not have unlimited illegal immigration, right? And so even if you're on the immigration issue, even if you're like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be deporting people the way we're deporting people, at the end of the day, you might probably still be aligned with the Republican Party more so than you're aligned with Joe Biden's policies of an open border, for instance.
Right.
Right. So you can apply this kind of logic to a host of other issues about, how we should approach things. And I think that is part of the reason why Trump was able to dramatically expand his coalition in the last election.
Well, I also think that the vibes are definitely a distal, sort of like an after effect. I think people really saw the equation of just the double standards on the left, and how especially for a lot of Black Americans, this is a real time of awakening, if you will, without being even too sentimental, because when you really go back and you see that so many of the left's policies have in fact done the opposite of what they purport to do, that being these these good policies to help ameliorate the suffering of groups on the margin. And really what you see is the opposite. And I think a lot of people had a first Trump term and people were afraid, but he came in and gave voice to that dissonance, to that discord. And then we had a break and we saw all chaos ensue for our own, with our own eyes. And you have like this younger group of people who are coming to the fore as voters, seeing it sort of in a meta way, like especially if they're on the fringes of society to some degree. There's a big movement now of gay men basically saying, no thanks to the trans movement. I'm not part of it. That's not part of my, quote, identity. It's just because I'm part of that whole acronym doesn't mean anything. Just people, I think, they're finally are unshackled from this identity, this being imbued upon them, this identity that they have to adhere to. And you see that a lot. And I think I saw pictures of this and videos of this event. Was there someone
yeah,
singing "I'm proud to be an American"? Was there a woman there singing that song?
So it was Alexis Wilkins.
Yes. Yeah.
She is a country singer and also the girlfriend of FBI Director Kash Patel. And so she was special guest. She basically preluded Soulja Boy's performance. He was the headliner. So
just nuts.
She led a sing-along of God Bless the USA, this like really, famous
God Bless the
patriotic
USA.
song
Right.
that has, since been associated with the Trump movement because they sing it so much. That's the left's lost, honestly, that they haven't, also embraced such a song. But yeah, everyone in the crowd was singing along, like, I'm proud to be an American, all of these things. And it's just crazy to imagine anything like that happening, the equivalent happening on the left these days. That's just how polarized patriotism has gone. And then Soulja Boy obviously performed. It was a crazy, crazy time. There was a rooftop. It was an open bar. There was McDonald's that was delivered. The president's favorite fast food.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
But there's something specific about this that God Bless the USA song came out during 9/11 I think specifically for 9/11, if I'm not mistaken. But there was this sense, truly a sense of being an American. Of this is not this. Maybe there was a bit of over sentimentality, but it was a real effect that most, if not the overwhelming majority of Americans felt, a sense of patriotism against a nefarious actor on the outside. And terrorism, the Islamists and the people who stand against our values. And it's funny because now you have this song that has emerged, has become a staple, and you have a bunch of people who are getting on board with this movement at this event, signaling not only just for fun and fanfare, but harnessing that true sense of being proud to be, or proud to be an American, but really a sense of individuality, awakening to binding to something that is bigger than themselves, where now you have this contrasting with the left that continues to play this horn of identity. They just are not learning. So what you see at that kind of event is just. I saw videos and I was so happy. I posted it of that woman singing, and the comment that I got, the first comment was self-hating blacks in America right here, like something like that. They were denigrating the fact that you had black Americans who were Trump supporters and who loved the song and essentially like living in this fake world. And it was so upsetting to see that, but that's just one comment. But that sentiment still it rings, you know, on the left especially.
It's interesting, Anthony, you bring up, so you use the phrase like, or I'm forgetting exactly, but kind of as opposed to the left, like what I'm getting at here is, so you have this person who comments that you know, this is a self-hating black person, and I used the term nagging earlier, and that's what I'm talking about. This nagging, like, oh, you don't agree with me? You must be you support Trump. You must be a self-hating black person. Instead of giving a person the courtesy or like just assuming like just a basic level of intelligence and individuality to assume that actually they have reasons for supporting Donald Trump. And you know, I'll just be clear, like, I'm not a Trump fan. I don't like him all that much. I wouldn't look at a black guy who supports Trump and say, oh, he must be self-hating. That's just absurd. And it's like, and it's sort of this, like, I feel like the MAGA movement is partially or maybe largely reactionary to the modern left, in the sense that like especially amongst young people. What's a good way to put this? I saw a video of Matt Stone, who co-created South Park, and this was like in the 2000s, right? Talking about how in LA he would just like jokingly say, oh, actually, I'm a Republican. I love George Bush. I think he's great, because you'd get this reaction from people that was like, oh my God. And his point was like, the only way to be, and he said this in no uncertain terms, the only way to be a punk rock in LA is to support George Bush and be a Republican, right? And it's something kind of similar to that happening now. It's like, to be rebellious or to be like edgy as a young person these days, you have to be a MAGA supporter or a Republican or a libertarian or something that isn't, you know, progressive, democratic socialist, Democrat, something like that. Because they're the ones who are being, it's like they're being so naggy and like holier than thou and like, what's the word? They're moralized so much, as we've been talking about, that the way to be punk, the way to rebel is to be like, screw your morals. I'm going to say retard if I want to. I'm going to support Trump if I want to. Don't tell me what to do. And, you know, and that makes sense. It kind of like is like almost a cultural cycle, right? Because when I was young, when I was 15, you know, like, or when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, the Republicans were the ones who were like, you know, you shouldn't curse and don't take the Lord's name in vain, and we need to be careful about stem cell research because that's bad, and God doesn't want us to. Those stem cells could be babies or some. Like, it was like weird shit like that, and it's like, and it was like cool to be liberal because it was like, don't tell us how to speak. I'll use the Lord's name. I'll be an atheist if I want to. Like. And now it's flipped. It's flipped because the left are the ones that are moralizing. And this is what kind of the common thread of everything we've been talking about is, you can't say that. You can't come to this party. You're transphobic. They're moralizing. And so it's punk rock to be like, actually, Israel's kind of cool. You know what I mean? Like, that's actually kind of punk rock now.
Which have any opinion other than the one on the left.
Right, exactly.
There's a lot of people that even distinguish themselves. Oh, I'm like a progressive, but not in that way. Not in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this poll that came out around July 4th. It's the yearly American Pride poll. I don't know if you guys saw that, but we used to have 90+% of people saying they were extremely or very proud to be an American. And that was, you know, shortly after 9/11. And that's now declined to 58%. And by political party, still over 90% of Republicans say that they are proud to be an American.
It's consistent. Yep.
It's consistent. And this is for extremely or very proud. But Democrats used to be similar figures in the early 2000s, but they have steadily declined. And now only 36% say they're extremely or very proud. And this is going to be a real problem for the left. And so
it is. Yeah, it really, and that graph with that, at the moment I saw that, I heard JFK's quote, and I hope I don't mess it up. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do. Wait, what can? All right, I'm screwing
What
this
you
up.
can do
Ask
for your
not
That's
what.
country.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
What you can do for your country, because it to me it's when you see that that chart and you see the data on for the Republicans, there's some deviation, but the trend is very solid in terms of, you know, in favor of the country, in terms of patriotism as a measure. But when it came to the Democrats, like you said, it dropped really quite steep. And to me, it's this idea that regardless, for people who are more conservative, they don't tend to think of America as a utility, that which, you know, placates their whims or their needs. It's a constant. It's a place where we are all under this one unifying thing. And given what's been going on with the progressive left, it seems more and more that America needs to be at its beck and call. It needs to adjust to its whims. It's not this constant. They view it more as something that's pliable to what they think is inevitable. Like, well, for sure we've passed the threshold of what's acceptable. Of course you can consider yourself a man if you're a woman, or the other way around. Or of course abortion is a given. For them everything's a given. It's like we've reached some kind of utopia, and that anybody who's behind is just lagging and crazy and stupid. But it's like you said, Jonas, it's going to be very difficult for them. Now, what do you think? What do you mean by that statement? It's going to be very hard for them, apart from like the fact that they're going to be very disliked by a lot of people. But like, what do you think that plays out as?
Well, I mean, part of the reason that they've lost a lot of support is that a lot of people do like living in America and they do enjoy being an American. So it's a very simple political problem for them, right? They don't want to support a party that they perceive to not like the basic premise of the West in America. And it's fun. It's that it's they can't vote for a party that doesn't believe that America and the West are fundamental forces for good.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to lose them a lot of support, because being patriotic, I think, to a lot of the vote, especially the voters that matter in sort of middle America and not the coast, these votes matter a lot to the parties, and these are also some of the most patriotic regions of the country.
Right.
Another interesting thing that you'll see is that the Republican support fluctuates like a little bit, like plus minus 3 or 5%,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who's in power. But it's hard to really establish kind of a correlation there. Where the left support, the Democrat support really fell was after Trump was elected.
Right. That's right.
And
Yeah.
so what is interesting to me is that, okay, well, America elected this president through the American process, and all of a sudden you're not proud to be an American anymore. And even in the 2024 election, right, it's like, okay, this was someone that won the popular vote this time, that over half of the country supported, and you just want to distance yourself from them. And I think it speaks to there is something about Trump. There's a lot of things about Trump that we could talk about that make people crazy and that people can't stand. And the left was hoping that after 4 years, we'd elect someone like Joe Biden, and then Trump would be totally out of the picture forever, and that we would just have to resist him for 4 years, lash out at him for 4 years, and then we could go back to, same old, same old. That is the opposite of what happened, but the strategy still hasn't changed. The strategy is still to, oppose everything.
Impugn, right?
Right,
Exactly.
to be like,
Right.
okay, we're not accepting this reality. We're not accepting that Trump is America's leader. But like, we have elections here. This is what the people chose. And at some point you have to ask yourself, are you speaking up for the people, or are you advancing sort of your own agenda? I mean, there's ways to disagree with Trump that are like productive and constructive, and there are ways that are not productive, and calling him a fascist and doing all of the other things, all of the other name calling, is not actually very productive.
It's so stupid. I'm sorry to say that so out loud and so boldly. When people, again, back from earlier in the episode, fascism, they don't even see that so many of their behaviors are fascistic in terms of rigidity. And but anyway, I digress. I wonder, like,
Well, it's well, real quick, Anthony. It's authoritarian, right? Is like
it's authoritarian.
people,
Yeah,
it's like the
right.
horseshoe theory, right? It's like you get
Yeah.
so far left, you get into like communism that inevitably ends in authoritarian regimes and authoritarian thought patterns and tendencies. And the same thing with the right. You go far enough right, it's fascism. And maybe the underlying structures are sort of different in their makeup, but the underlying, but the ultimate effect is to have an authoritarian system, which is quite similar in its repressive nature, right?
Yeah, I mean, but even the way that the left architects itself, even though it promotes this idea of flattening a hierarchy, it still tends toward a fascistic model in a sense that there are those hierarchies that, up to bureaucracy, from the student body to the bureaucracy. And so it still becomes very, yes, it's authoritarian in temperament, but it's funny how, all roads for them lead to fascism too, just to a varying degree, a very big degree actually. But anyway, it's nuts. Anyway.
Yeah.
One thing that I hope the article that I have coming out will spark is
that
a
is currently out.
conversation-
Remember, well, this will come out.
Currently out. That is currently out.
Read Jonas's article. We'll link to it in the
Yes.
episode notes.
Is okay. So you have a lot of the right, or the current right, especially the young right. You have a lot of the young right united around opposing political correctness, supporting free speech, on just simply being patriotic and saying we have to have a country again. What happens if or when the left decides to reform, right? What if abundance takes over? What if the abundance movement becomes the dominant ideology of the left? And instead of focusing on social justice and social issues, they somehow manage to purge that faction. And they're like, okay, we're going to focus on, working with the private sector, but also utilizing the power of government to continue to build and to create more housing and healthcare and education and infrastructure. That is the core of the abundance movement. It's supply side progressivism, and it's, I think, going to be very popular with voters. What happens if they try to do that? And where does the right go then, right? If the right is built on supporting all of these things that the left opposes, and the left suddenly starts embracing them, there needs to be some kind of ideological leadership on the right, I think, to harness that and to get them back.
Yeah, it's like back to the point about vibes. It's like, in terms of policy, there might be something there, but also, again, just the vibes, right? Like the thing that I think Ezra Klein and oh my gosh, why do I always forget the author's name? Someone help me.
Derek Thompson.
Derek Thompson, thank you. I always forget it. I don't know why, and I shouldn't. But Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson got so right, or like did so well, was just say, hey, we need to build. And that's a vibe shift. That is like, we need to stop nagging, we need to start building. We need to stop like over-regulating, we need to start letting America, do what it does best, and build. And like that is and I haven't, admittedly, I've listened to many interviews, but haven't read the book yet. But I do get the sense that it's positive. It's the same kind of thing that you see in the MAGA movement, where it's like, let's do things. Let's be positive. Let's be proud to be American. Let's build. Let's reinvent the left. Let's do something constructive. That positive energy, I think, has the potential, if it's really taken to heart by Democrats, to actually put some steam, back in that movement, back in their political party. The question is, do they accept it? Can they accept it? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. There was this interesting poll that I saw actually about abundance. They asked, it was by a progressive left agency, but they asked people, would you vote for an abundance candidate, a candidate that prioritizes deregulation and, supply side bottlenecks and things like that, versus someone that's like tax the corporations and tax the rich and labor unions and all of these sort of things that have been going on. And, as you would expect, taxing the rich is quite popular, and that wins out over Democratic voters especially. What is interesting is that Republican voters actually support the abundance agenda more than the populist agenda. So it's possible that abundance could be something that gains more steam on the right rather than on the left in a post-MAGA world. Right now, MAGA doesn't really have any ideology. They're sort of Trump, whatever Trump wants to do. But if someone on the right comes along and starts, I think, embracing some of these abundance ideals, it could be something really productive. So I think the challenge for the left is going to be, it's the challenge of economics, really, which is like, how do you convince people that rent freezes are bad? And how do you convince people that like government run grocery stores and things that are like, that sound good but don't actually work? How do you convince them that that is not actually something that works? How do you convince people that abundance is actually what's going to get you what you want? So, yeah.
It's an age-old question, that's for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to look up this image, of Yeltsin. There's like, it's so funny to me, the state-run grocery stores, because you can look up, and I encourage everyone, we'll include it in the show notes, but you can look up like YouTube videos about it and stuff. But you can like see Yeltsin at an American grocery store, I think in Texas, and he's like flabbergasted. And it's like, because he's coming from the Soviet Union where they've got like such limited supply of so many things. And he comes to this American grocery store and it's like, they have 10 flavors of everything times 100. Like they've got plenty of everything and 10 versions of it at least, right? And he just can't believe it. And so the idea that like straight run grocery stores would be better than ones that are privately owned is just cockamamie, right? It's just absurd. But to your point, Jonas, like, how do you convince people that and rent freezes aren't good? Because we talked about this in our second episode. We called it the Mamdani effect.
Mamdani is a great example,
right? And we talked about this, and it's just like those policies sound so good because the intent at base is good. Like people, we should freeze rents because people can't pay rent, and that's bad. We all agree that's bad. We want people to be able to afford housing. We should do state-run grocery stores because food's getting expensive. Food is getting expensive. It is expensive. It has gotten expensive, right? So let's run them. Let's run state-run, city-run grocery stores, and they won't have to pay taxes and all these other cost-cutting measures, and it'll be great. It sounds great. And it's hard to argue against it because, again, it goes back to the moralizing. It's like, well, I'm arguing as a progressive that people should be able to afford rent and afford to live and afford food, and you're saying that that's bad, so you're evil, you're immoral. But it's like, no, it's because it won't work. I'd love if it worked, I'd be all for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Zohran Mamdani is such a great example of that. And I'm very pessimistic about where the state of New York is going to go. The state of New York City is going to go if he wins the general election.
It's looking more and more possible that it could actually happen. And I don't have much to say about it because it's so staggering and insane. And we've been here before with Bernie Sanders, but Bernie had a bit of a different bent to him. Maybe I'm just a little biased because I actually, when I was in my progressive phase, I supported him. But looking back, actually, it's probably Mamdani's a little more leans further into the communist trajectory, if you will. But how do you convince people? I don't know. Some people are saying just let it happen and let them see for themselves, and I don't like that. I don't like that view. I mean, I hope that the voters who didn't get the chance to vote in the primary come out for the general and have some sense about them.
Well, I think one problem is the media. Actually, I was thinking about this recently. The way that they cover public policy is not really neutral, right? Things are sort of the challenge of economics, as you both said, is convincing people that the unintuitive answer is actually the right answer and that the intuitive answer doesn't work, right? Freezing rents doesn't lower rents.
It helps a very small group of underprivileged people for a time, but has vastly more negative consequences for most people over time.
Yeah, it's like
Right.
superficial.
Yeah.
It's a superficial effect.
Some people will
And
benefit a little bit in one small way. Yeah.
And so what I think would happen if a city got rid of rent controls and the media was writing, like the New York Times or someone was going to write a story about it, the story would go something like, "Oh, under this plan, first of all, like all of these people under rent control are going to lose their rent control protection, and their rents, could go anywhere." What's going to be missing, obviously, from the conversation is going to be how much new housing is this going to stimulate? What are the other downstream effects of this? And you see the same thing over and over again. Student loans are another example, right? The way the media is going to cover the cut in federal student loan access is going to be, this is decreasing college access. It's not going to be, this is actually going to drive down the cost of college because you're not subsidizing things and you're making the schools pay for more of it and be more accountable to it rather than, just throwing unlimited money at it.
Right.
So
you have to think of the
problem
second
is
and third
partially
order
perception.
effects.
Right. And that's something that you have to report. You cannot just report the very, very intuitive first order effect.
Right. And I will say, like, rent control has been a part of New York for so long, and so many people in rent controlled properties, that you wouldn't want to do it overnight. That really would be bad because it would be too much change too quickly, too big of a shock to the system. I'd assume you'd have to probably phase it out and also deregulate at the same time and allow people to build as you're phasing out rent control, so that when those people do get displaced, they actually do have affordable, housing to go to that is affordable, just because purely, again, the second, third order effect of just more availability of housing, but yeah, it wouldn't be good to do it overnight, but like, something's got to be done about it because it's totally screwing with New York's housing market.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking about the kind of growth that New York City could experience if they had like a Javier Milei come in and just slash regulation.
Afuera.
Yes. It is what they need. And the turnaround in Argentina was so quick in terms of like housing supply. The market responds surprisingly quickly. Yeah, like they spike for a little bit, for like a month or two, and then rapidly it starts going down and down and down.
There's like a quick overheating effect. Like there's a quick effect, and then it diminishes over time. Is that
right,
what
and people see and people see the effects really, really, really easily. If you just look up the graph of
I
like
saw that,
rent prices in Buenos Aires, you'll see exactly what I mean. And this is the reason why cities like Austin, Texas are growing, and cities like New York and San Francisco and LA are shrinking. And it's not something, even in DC we have rent control, and we have lots of overregulation problems here. But yeah, I mean, I do think that Texas, where you are, Clay, is experienced such massive levels of growth because it's so easy to build, and it's even building things like clean energy faster than places on the coast.
Yep. I will say, like,
it's public policy.
So I am in Austin. I work at an office in downtown Austin, and the younger people that I'm in the office with are like moving here and trying to find apartments, and they are finding amazing apartments where the first month or two of rent is covered, where they have a gym, a pool, like a lot of space for a really good price. And it's just because Austin, I will say, kind of has the opposite problem, where they might have overbuilt, expecting more and more people to go to Austin, and that boom is sort of leveling off. But either way, it's great for renters. I mean, these kids are getting like screaming good deals on apartments right downtown by all the bars and all the nightlife, and it's just that in New York would cost you $8,000 a month or so. I mean, it would just be, the difference is preposterous. And it's just because Austin was like, fuck it, we're going to build. We're just going to let people build. And I was able to buy a house because housing was affordable and a nice little neighborhood, quiet. And my mortgage isn't too bad. And it's just because, the areas outside of I almost said Boston for some reason, Austin, are building a lot of housing. So the market hasn't gone crazy.
Hearing a millennial talk about, and I'm a millennial too, like talk about a mortgage sounds like it's like watching Christ rise from the dead or something like that. It's insane.
He is risen, Anthony, in Austin, Texas. Yeah. So we've been going. We're coming on like an hour 45 now. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Jonas. But I think since we're kind of on the subject already, I would like to ask you. You're not a New York native. You moved from Atlanta, Georgia, if I'm correct, or somewhere in the area, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so you came to New York for college, and now you're down in DC. With your brief time in New York, having experienced everything that you did, what did you think about New York? And this is kind of an open-ended question on purpose to just sort of kind of see where your mind goes with it. But I have a lot of thoughts about New York that we'll get into, I'm sure, in later episodes, and I know Anthony does too. But for you, what was New York like? What was the good? What was the bad? What was the ugly? What do you think? What struck you about the city? Take that however you want to.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, here's how I'm going to answer that. So, what is striking and appealing about New York, especially to me and to a lot of Columbia freshmen, was that the spirit of building and growth and innovation was visible all around you. You have to imagine the level of foresight and ambition that it took to build the New York City subway to places that hadn't even been developed yet. To build the one train to Upper Manhattan, which was farmland. Even Columbia, it was surrounded by single family homes, and there were tons and tons of open lots around the time that train opened. You would build the 7 train out to Queens. Like, who does that, right? Who builds things with such foresight and with such efficiency, mind you? That requires vision, right? The Empire State Building, when you see the skyline of New York, that requires a level of ambition. To bring, the finance capital of the world to New York that requires vision, and that required planning. The groundwork for this level of building, and this level of energy and innovation was laid a long time ago. It was, I think part of it happened in the city grid plan in the 19th century. That was also something visionary, by the way. Who plans the grid for the entire city before there's any sign that it's going to grow to the level that it has grown to today? Even the planning of Central Park in the middle of Manhattan is a good example of that. But my point is that all around you in New York City are indications of the spirit of ambition and the spirit of vision. But the problem with New York is that I don't think that spirit is still there. The reason why New York is great is because of things that were done many, many decades and even centuries ago that have created downstream effects to today, right? Like, once you have, finance going on in New York in the early days of the banking industry in America, that's just going to continue to grow because it's already there. So there's a lot of sort of sticky effects that I think come from that, right? Like, the subway hasn't expanded in decades. It hasn't grown at the rate that it was growing at in terms of building new lines, back in the mid to early 20th century. That hasn't grown like that in many, many decades, but that rail network was already there. And so you can grow neighborhoods and cities and redevelop along those lines many, many times over before, you stagnate on that end. So what has happened in New York, I think, is that spirit is no longer there. It's people aren't interested in that anymore. And this, I think, is related to abundance, right? It is extremely difficult to build. People don't plan projects with the level of ambition that they do. People still want to go to New York because there's so much opportunity there, and just a lot of companies are headquartered there, and they're again benefiting from the downstream effects of planning and good public policy from many, many years ago. But I'm not sure that that is going to continue to drive them if they don't continue to expand it. And this is why cities in Texas are growing so fast. This is why the Sunbelt is growing so fast, because they have allowed for this kind of growth that used to fuel cities like New York. And even in terms of the people that are going to New York, these are people that go to Columbia, for example, right? The politics of the people moving to York does matter, right? And the reason why Mamdani was elected was because I think of the growth of the professional managerial class that has been overproduced by, the colleges, and they think that they deserve a lot more than what is available to them, right? Imagine you got a college degree and you come from a good family and you move to New York hoping to find a job, and you have to have 3 roommates and you don't have a window in your bedroom, right? And you can't afford to, do the things that you want to do, even though you did all the things right in life. You feel like you did all the things right in life, and you feel like the system is against you. And when you have a candidate like Mamdani come in and vow to take down the system, you're gonna vote for that, and that appeals to you. And so
Right.
I think that the people that and this is also part of the reason why, as we were talking about, like the oppression Olympics resonates with this educated class of people so much. It's the same philosophy. So when you're importing these kinds of people into New York that are more concerned with, well, one, their own, sort of livelihoods, but also the sense that like they are oppressed in some way, and
Right.
we have to vote for social justice and work towards that being the primary goal, rather than building and innovating, which is what New York I think used to be about. That very much contributes to the stagnation that I think we're seeing. So I love New York. I love the energy of the city. I love, just being there and taking it all in, and just the dirtiness and the noise, and that stuff is amazing, being from Atlanta. But living there, and you think critically about the people that you meet and the way that the city is run, I would say that I think thinking about it in terms of how big the vision of New York is from decade to decade is a good way to do it.
Well, that is a very interesting answer, and yet it's interesting you touched on this like effect of, what is it, the overproduction of elites, right? Too many people going to Ivy League schools and thinking I deserve something great. In a sense, they're not wrong, because they did everything right. Really, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
they went to the nice school, they worked really hard, they got their degree, and the opportunities aren't there. The housing that they would want to live in isn't there. And so that frustration, at the very least, is not totally off base.
And that gives them something tangible to put them in line with the oppressed, so to speak, working class.
Right.
And they're also getting degrees in gender studies and all these other types of studies.
Hey,
which are-
I happen to know that my company is hiring 30 new gender studies engineers. So why don't you gender engineer? No, you're right, Anthony. Of course.
That's going to be fun. And that's,
Yeah.
no, so you have a, just a asymmetry in terms of what actually drives productivity, of course, a lot of these students are kind of against that idea to begin with. So just going in to become manufacturers, producers of their pet theories and ideas that don't stick when it comes to a few blocks away from Columbia University when you're in Harlem, or other neighborhoods that are often sidelined by the very people who claim to support them. And so, yeah, that's everything you said is I have been feeling more and more as I get older about New York. Just generally the feel of it and being there, taking it all in, incredible. But more and more as time goes on, and as these other cities absorb New Yorkers and Northeasterners, it's just becoming evident that it's failing, frankly.
Yeah. Well, that's a very gloomy note to end on. So I'm gonna though it's true. I mean, I would never. I'll say this. I'll never count New York out. I was not a huge fan of living there. I loved Columbia. Didn't love New York. I loved things about it. I'm not a big city, like condensed city person like that. My dream is to move to like a compound in Idaho. Not one of the white nationalist ones, though. I just want to
In a
make that
yurt,
clear.
in a yurt somewhere in
a yurt. I
Montana?
just like nature. I just want to be clear about that. But to kind of end on a brighter note, you two may have noticed in the background, and anyone watching like our reels or watching on YouTube might have noticed some things moving around in the background. So I'll just give you a good look at the cutest thing.
Oh,
in
I
the
thought you were
world.
going to show us your fan. I was like, well,
My
aw.
puppies have been sleeping right behind me. There's one, and let me see, there's the other. That's Ladybug.
So cute.
And that is in this really funny position. That's Bunny. They're like 4 months old, so they're very sweet. And
I feel like I could
let me
just
put my
jump in
camera
and
back
pet
here.
them. They're very cute.
Yeah, I might just do that. But I experimented. They always kind of scratch at the door when I'm recording because they like to be in here with me, and I haven't let them before, and I experimented with it this time, and they were very good girls.
They're very good audience members. So
Yes, they
Yeah.
were. They were very patient. They were very good.
Not
they
a
were very
peep
quiet.
or a bark out of them. Very sweet.
So anyway, something cute and fun to end on, so it's not so doom and gloom. But thank you so much, Jonas Dew, for joining us. Once again, you guys can find Jonas Dew on all sorts of social media. We'll have it in the show notes. We'll have his article posted in the show notes. Please go check him out. Follow him. Subscribe to the Free Press. And thanks a lot, Jonas, and we'll hopefully have you on again soon.
Thank you, Clay and Anthony, for having me.